Let's wait one more minute until we open up the meeting to see who else will be joining us.
All right.
Great, so let's go ahead and start today's meeting. So this is the regular meeting of the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council for Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. It is 12:02, and we are conducting this meeting via Zoom and telephonically. It's in response to the declared state and local emergencies due to the novel coronavirus and limited public access to the Hall of Administration. Consistent with the Governor's Executive Order N-29-20, this Ventura County Climate Emergency Council meeting will be conducted via Zoom and telephonically. And so as we go through the agenda, I just did the call to order. Could we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Councilmember White.
I'm here.
Councilmember Ferris.
Present.
Chair Schnapp.
Here.
Councilmember Kessley let me know that she would be absent, so she will not be joining us today. Councilmember Garola.
Here.
Councilmember Para.
Chair.
Thank you and welcome. Vice Chair Chavez.
Here, thank you.
And Councilmember Baldwin.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum present.
Great, thank you. Let's roll into item number 3 on the agenda, the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Baldwin, do you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Ready? Begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty for all.
Thank you very much. And let's go on to item number 4, which is administering the oath of office for an incoming VCCEC member. Go ahead, Clay.
So today we have Sue Hughes from the County Executive Office helping administer the oath of office for Marianne Para, who's our new community representative for the Saticoy community. Take it away, Sue.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, and welcome to the VCCEC, Marianne. So what I would like to do is I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand. I would like to read the entire oath and then just have you answer in the affirmative, please. Okay, so raise your right hand. I state your name.
Yeah, I can barely hear you, but
Oh, let's see if this is on my end or can everyone else hear me?
sometimes out here, because it's so windy, the Zoom kind of goes in and out. So sometimes I turn the picture off, but I understand you need to see this. For this, I'll leave the picture
Okay.
on.
So let's try this. I'm gonna, so raise your right hand. I state your name.
Marianne Para,
Do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter. If you will please answer in the affirmative.
cut out just the last end cut out.
If you will just answer in the affirmative. Yes?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. Clay will work to get you the form for your signature, and then I'll also sign, and we'll get you a copy of that. Thank you, Clay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sue, and thank you and welcome, Marianne.
Thank you. And welcome, Marianne. Good to have you on board.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right, so let's move on to item number 5, the approval of the minutes from our July 19th, 2022 Climate Emergency Council meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
I'll second. Keith.
Okay, so moved by Councilmember Baldwin, seconded by Keith Garola. All those in favor, let's go ahead and have a roll call, please.
Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Garola,
Yes.
Councilmember Para,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chavez,
Aye.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item number 6, we have public comments for items not on the agenda. And so we could have folks either raise their hand or pull themselves off the mute. And I do know there's members of the public here, but I don't see anyone raising their hands just yet. Do
And
you
Chair,
see any-
staff has not received any written correspondence, and I do not see any hands raised in the gallery at this time.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll move on then. For correspondence agenda, you have items 7 through 14 on the correspondence agenda. Any questions on that?
There are no items that need input at this time. This is just correspondence agenda.
Yeah, okay. So let's move on to the regular agenda. So we have item number 15, the resolution which authorizes remote teleconference meetings of this Climate Emergency Council for a 30-day period pursuant to Government Code Section 54953, Subdivision E of the Ralph M. Brown Act. Clay, go ahead.
There are no changes to this at this time. This is simply a continuation of what you've done over the last few months, authorizing remote participation in these meetings.
Travis moves.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Moved by Vice Chair Chavez, seconded by Councilmember Baldwin. Could we have a roll call, please?
Okay, Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Garola,
Aye.
Councilmember Para,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chavez,
Aye.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, great, thank you. Moving on to item number 16, that's a consideration and discussion of our future meeting formats of this Climate Emergency Council. So we've reserved about 10 minutes on the agenda for this discussion. So Clay, do you want to go ahead and kick that off?
Sure. Staff was asked to add this to the agenda so that there would be a short space to determine if there's any interest in changing the format with which meetings are currently being held. Obviously, they're being held remotely at this time. If there's an interest to discuss alternatives like meeting in person, then that's what this was intended to provide. Don't have a formal presentation. It was really just intended to be a place for the council members if you pose any questions or and just open it up. And that's it. It's been brought up a handful of times, typically attached to a different item. So we wanted to give it space.
So are there any comments from the committee, from the council members on this? Go ahead, Councilmember White.
Thank you, Sylvia. Well, I just think that we ought to consider having our meetings run longer. I know that at just about every meeting we've had, we kind of run out of time to cover everything that's on the agenda. I would be in favor of extending the amount of time allotted for our meetings. What is it now exactly?
Typically, the meetings are targeted at 2 hours, and that's what we typically schedule the agenda to include.
Councilmember White, do you have a recommendation as to maybe how long, much more time that you would think would be appropriate?
Well, certainly a half an hour would be good. I know in our last meeting that probably would have taken care of everything we had on the agenda. So I guess I would suggest that. I don't know if everybody else wants to do it.
I'm thinking, well, these are my comments on that, is that maybe not all meetings will go for 2.5 hours, but for those that maybe we have a little bit more discussion necessary, we may put down 2.5 hours. I know I'm comfortable with 2 hours. And I know one of the things that we did for this committee is to actually move to meeting more frequently. So, you know, we have been meeting monthly and trying to, to get through what we need to do as council members. So that would be my suggestion for the time frame. Anyone else that wants to chime in? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Gurrola.
So from my perspective, I would like to keep the virtual format only for the fact that living out at the east end of the county, it's another hour of my day in commute if I had to drive into Ventura or centrally located. So I would prefer to keep the virtual, no matter what format or as not format, but regardless of how long we go on the meetings.
Okay. Yes, I see Vice Chair Chavez with your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just real quick, I just wanted to kind of briefly respond. Our meetings are 2 hours right now, and I think that's a sufficient amount of time. I think all we need to do is work on completing that, since many of us do have hard stop times at 2. So I don't believe extending the meetings is the best approach. But I do believe that we need to rework our format so that it's a little bit easier. It's still keeping in, the public participation, council members, but by 2 o'clock, I already see like more than half our quorum always ends up dropping off because of this hard stop time. And then now I too now have a hard stop time. So I would say that we need to be within those 2 hours, keep our comments concise and to the point. And I think we might be able to get through the meeting a little faster. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Go ahead, Councilmember.
I know this is really my first meeting, so I'm not really familiar with them, but I just know from previous experience from other meetings I have, we usually do about an hour, hour and a half. But if it's something really important or we're going to have on the agenda, then we give ourselves more times. But I do prefer the Zoom. So I guess as things continue to change within our community health wise, we can just figure that along as it goes.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Farah. Councilmember Baldwin.
So just a comment. Sometimes we have, when we run over, we start to lose people at 2 hours. If we're losing people at 2 hours, it seems like it might be worse at 2.5. And maybe somehow we need to manage the time better, whether it's being more brief or limiting the number of items going on the agenda or given meeting day because people do start to drop off when we hit the 2 hour point. I think it might get worse at 2.5.
You have a point there, because I know many times I've had a hard stop at 2 o'clock. So, I kind of hear that the group would like to stay virtual through this time. And, perhaps the recommendation is that we do have a 2 p.m. close. And if there's the opportunity for folks to have concise messages, as well as, also encouraging the public to make comments, that we could probably stop at 2 for the most part. And then for anything that might need more of a discussion, it's perhaps placed on the agenda, maybe up above some of the other items, so we can handle those appropriately and get them done within that time frame. Councilmember Ferris, do you have any comments here on this item?
I mean, in general, I'm squeezing 2 hours out of the workday in order to participate here. I think that any changes I would figure out how to accommodate, but the longer they go, the more challenging it becomes. So I say that let's at least try to. I think we should continue to be open to changing the format as best as we can to meet the needs of the council. Part of that will be, do we do our homework beforehand and bring a well-vetted proposal for consideration of the council?
Okay, thank you. All right, so any other comments from council members? Is there anybody, I'll just open it up for brief comments to the public, from the public. Any hands raised on this? Or any comments here? All right, seeing none then. So it sounds as though that it would be great to open it up if there was any other formats, but for the time being that we'll continue with virtual, and that we'll make it until 2 o'clock with maybe considerations of the items that are coming up on the agenda to be very fine-tuned, so that we can get everything covered within that 2-hour time frame. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, all right. Looks like we have, I see nodding of heads here. Clay, do we, and thumbs up. We don't need this to be an action item, right? It was just discussion.
Nope, there's no agendized action item requested. So I think that you can move on to the next agenda item if you feel that the group is ready to do so.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we are on item number 17, and that's an update from county executive staff. That's usually done by Clay Downing. So go right ahead, Clay.
All right, so I will start off my update by telling you some good news. If you recall, a few months ago, this council participated in a letter of support that went from the Sustainability Division to the Gold Coast Transit District. And you may have seen they've recently released a press release. They received federal funding for hydrogen cell fuel buses. I believe, I'm not looking at the figure right now, but I'm happy to circulate the press release to this council later. But I believe it was approximately $12.4 million. So don't quote me, I'll be happy to send it, but that's great news for what this group was supporting in terms of what they brought back to us and what they'll be able to do with it in the future. Additionally, I wanted to note there was an email sent around to the Climate Emergency Council members earlier this morning, just sending out a reminder email that there is a 2022 Ventura County Building Code workshop coming up this afternoon at 3 in the afternoon that is related to the county's Reach Code project. Again, that's scheduled today for 3 in the afternoon. And that is the second of 2 workshops that'll be part of that building code update. And that item is scheduled to go to the Board of Supervisors on October 4th. Please keep in mind, all board items until the agenda actually comes out, those are always tentative dates, but that's what's on that's what we're expecting at this point. Then the other updates that I have is for the Climate Emergency Council proposals that are scheduled to go before the Board of Supervisors. That's still scheduled to happen on September 20th, and that's tentatively scheduled for 11:30 time certain, which means it won't necessarily happen at 11:30. It means it can't happen before that. But again, that'll be on the agenda when it's published, and these are the 2 proposals that came from this council and that went to the Planning Commission back on July 7th. And then the last update I have is also scheduled to happen tentatively on September 20th, as the Planning Division is scheduled to provide an update to the Board of Supervisors on general plan implementation progress. And part of the reason that that is important is 81 of the 185 general plan programs are related to the Climate Action Plan. So a pretty substantial percentage are CAP related. So those are 2 items that are going on. If you care to tune in, obviously those items are all streamed and people can also attend the meetings too. So.
And those items will be available on the agenda, what, 3 days ahead of time?
That typically occurs, typically those are published on the Thursday preceding the Tuesday meeting. Occasionally, if there's an amendment or something that goes out, it might come out later than that and they'll redistribute it. But if anyone is interested in receiving those, you can always sign up to receive email notifications for the Board of Supervisors agendas. And if anyone has trouble finding that, I would encourage you to reach out to me and I'll help you find it.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Clay? Any comments? Okay. Wonderful, thank you.
Thank
So as we move through the agenda, we are on item number 18, and we have a guest speaker. It's Wendy Mata, Senior District Representative from the U.S. 24th Congressional District, representing Salud Carbajal. And so Wendy, it's really good to see you again. Thank you for joining us and for making this time happen on your calendar to give us a presentation from what's happening at the federal level. So I know, Clay, you have the documents that you can pull up for Wendy.
Yes, I can. I'll start that screen share. Wendy, if you'd care to introduce yourself, the show is all yours. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you both very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I thought I'd give you a little background on myself to begin with. I started working in government in 1990, and I started working at the Santa Barbara County Executive Office and then moved on to the Board of Supervisors. I then worked for Jack O'Connell in both the Assembly and the State Senate. I was also fortunate to work with Congresswoman Capps, and of course now I work with Congressman Carbajal. And you all may know, I'm sure you all know, that his district will encompass more Ventura County after January. And that will be much or most of Ventura City, Ojai, and the unincorporated area in between. So we want to make sure you know we're here as a resource for you. And today I wanted to go over two important laws that the 117th Congress passed and President Joe Biden signed, which will make our country more resilient and thoughtful as we address the issues of climate change. These two laws are the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Law, both of which Congressman Carbajal was a co-sponsor. To start with, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law was signed into law November 15th, 2021, and it currently has resources and grants available. I wanted to provide an overview of that law, starting with electric vehicle chargers. This legislation will invest $7.5 billion in building out a national network of EV chargers throughout the United States. This investment will support the goal of building a nationwide network of 500,000 EV chargers. Then I wanted to move on to clean and reliable energy. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law has a $65 billion investment in clean energy transmission and grid. Its purpose is to upgrade our power infrastructure by building thousands of miles of new resilient transmission lines to facilitate the expansion of renewables and clean energy while lowering costs. Its goal is to fund new programs to support the development, demonstration, and deployment of cutting-edge clean energy technologies to accelerate our transition to a zero-emission economy. It also covers clean water, which is the next slide. Currently, up to 10 million American households and 400,000 schools and child care centers lack safe drinking water. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law will invest $55 billion in expanding access to clean drinking water for households, businesses, schools, and child care centers all across the country. From rural towns to struggling cities, this law will invest in water infrastructure and eliminate lead service pipes, including for tribal nations and disadvantaged communities, which need it the most. It also touches upon resilient infrastructure. Additionally, it makes our community safer and our infrastructure more resilient to the impacts of climate change, with an investment of over $50 billion to protect against droughts, heat, floods, wildfires, in addition to a major investment in weatherization of homes. Now I'm going to move on to the Inflation Reduction Law. As you know, the president recently signed it on August 16th. We will be seeing the resources and grants related to it available January 1st, 2023. One of the first things it does is tackle lowering energy costs. For families that take advantage of the clean energy and electric vehicle tax credits within the law, they can save more than $1,000 per year. This includes rebates for families to buy heat pumps or other energy efficient home appliances, which can save families at least $350 per year. 7.5 million more families will be able to install solar on their roofs with a 30% tax credit. For families, this is about $9,000 over the life of the system. Additionally, there are up to $7,500 in tax credits for new vehicles and $4,000 in tax credits for used electric vehicles. These credits will take effect immediately. Building a clean energy economy. These goals will power homes, businesses, and communities with much more clean energy by 2030 and install 950 million solar panels, 120,000 wind turbines, and over 2,000 grid scale battery plants. It will also advance cost-saving clean energy projects at rural electric cooperatives serving 42 million people, strengthening climate resilience and protecting nearly 2 million acres of national forest, as well as creating good paying jobs to make clean energy in America. Moving on to reducing harmful pollution. Its goal is also to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by about 1 gigaton in 2030, or 1 billion metric tons, 10 times more climate impact than any other single law. It will deploy clean energy and reduce particle pollution from fossil fuels to curtail approximately 4,000 premature deaths and up to 100,000 asthma attacks annually by 2030 is the hopes. Regarding agriculture and rural communities, this law invests in agriculture to expand access to affordable clean energy and energy efficiency upgrades. It creates good paying jobs through climate smart agriculture and conservation, as well as protects communities from intensifying climate impacts like wildfires and extreme heat. Because of this law, farmers and ranchers will have tools they need to adopt practices tackling the climate crisis. These climate smart practices that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase storage of carbon in soils and trees, and make farmers and ranchers' operations more productive. It will create an innovative, cost-effective ways to measure and verify climate benefits, including through USDA's Environmental Quality Incentives Program, Conservation Stewardship Program, Agricultural Conservation Easement Program, Regional Conservation Partnership Program, and Conservation Technical Assistance. This will help up to 280,000 farmers and ranchers apply conservation techniques to approximately 125 million acres of land across America. I also wanted to point out to you, that's the end of my slide. Or you can advance to the next one where it has my contact information. But I also wanted to point out that Congressman Carbajal sits on the Transportation Committee, and he's the chair of the Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation Subcommittee. We work closely with Port Hueneme and other ports. So I wanted you also to know he sits on the Agricultural Committee. So we're very involved in these issues, and want to make sure that you feel free to reach out to me. And I invite Clay to reach out to me anytime if I can provide resources or specific grants that I understand they will be coming shortly, related to the new Inflation Reduction Law. So if you have any questions, feel free to let me know.
All right, thank you very much, Wendy. Are there any questions from the council members or comments? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Baldwin. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. All right, I have two questions. One question is, I've watched several different presentations about the IRA, as it's called, and there's a lot of information, but is there, I don't see a comprehensive, maybe comprehensive is the wrong, like a bullet format of what is in there that's going to matter with respect to climate change. And number two is when a lot of the things that are providing money for reducing greenhouse gas emissions are focused on people like me, and businesses, but I don't see or haven't recognized it that money might also come to governments. I'm thinking the county government center has a really nice a photovoltaic system out in the parking lot. Could they make it bigger? But it seems like the money's focused on tax breaks, and best of my knowledge, the county doesn't provide get taxed. So the money come in the form of grants to states and to local governments, particularly local government.
We will be seeing grants available after January 23rd, but there are grants right now available for counties to increase their solar. So there are processes out there, and I can always assist to provide more information on that. And I can break it down. The bill itself, as you point out, has many different aspects into it, such as prescription drugs and such. So I just touched upon the climate areas. If you like, I could put that in a bullets, the specific monies, but until they release all the grants, we won't really know exactly. It won't be really put out, but I'll be working with my staff, and as soon as something comes across my desk, I definitely can share it with Clay.
That would
So
be, thank you.
I'd be anxious to know as soon as possible what that money is, especially that what can be used here, because what we're doing is trying to figure out how to get things done, and it takes money to get things done. So
I can check into that right away to find out if there's what specific monies are targeted for local government.
thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions from council members?
Yes, I had a question in regards to talking in regards to the water. I know it says disadvantaged communities and tribal communities. Is tribal communities defined only by the federally recognized, which is the San Ynez Valley, or is it broken up by what is given by census or who's enrolled with the BIA?
Well, it is federally recognized tribes. So, but disadvantaged communities could also come into play. But if you have specific questions related to a group or something, please, feel free to reach out to me. It's not just for tribal nations or disadvantaged communities, but it includes them. It's targeting them directly because they've been left out so many times in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Wendy, thank you for boiling down all this information for us. Let me see if there are
Certainly.
any questions or comments from the public. If anybody has any questions or comments, go ahead and take yourself off of mute, or you can raise your hand at this point for this item. I don't see anyone wanting to comment or with a question. So thank you, Wendy. And if you could follow up with Clay once you get some of that information so you could pass it on to us, that would be fabulous.
Absolutely. Thank
Great.
you all for having me today.
Thank you. Bye. Okay, so let's get to the item number 19, which is a presentation, a request by Councilmember Baldwin for the Climate Emergency Council to approve a goal for use of 100% battery electric powered landscape equipment at county facilities. So go ahead, Councilmember Baldwin.
Thank you. So, excuse me, some time ago, I was reading one of my numerous emails from USC, where I went to graduate school. And there was a story about how the school became the first university in the nation to be a green zone, where they've replaced all of their landscape equipment, gas field landscape equipment, with battery equipment. One of the interesting parts was the idea came from groundskeepers, not from the bosses telling the groundskeepers what to do and how to do it. And so that got me thinking, and I started doing some research and looked up the agriculture, the Green Zone Alliance, and discovered that there's a number of cities around the nation. One of them is Ojai. Ojai was the second city in the nation to become a green zone. I started looking deeper and realized that there's a huge supply of battery-powered landscape equipment available for commercial users. It's been available for a while for people like us, but for professionals who use the equipment for many more hours than we do at home. And there's good reception with it in terms of the people using the equipment. They perform good. So I thought, well, maybe we should look at the county and see what can be done here to get everybody converted. Now, with respect to Ojai, as an example, they were able to get a $60,000 grant from the Air Pollution Control District, and as a condition of the grant, they were required to crush, it's called, the gas field equipment so that's not used anymore. And the whole idea is to stop the use of this equipment that's generating emissions that lead to greenhouse gases. But emissions really lead to a lot more than that. It's an ozone contributor, toxic emissions from the fuel. So there's a lot of benefit to be gained. And my recommendation is that the county try to go 100% battery powered equipment. It just so happens that I discovered about a month ago that the Air Pollution Control District will be getting $500,000 to do just this in Ventura County. And the county can definitely apply for it. However, in order to get this thing going, I've got, I think, 5 bullets on here to hire and perform an inventory of existing equipment. And I understand they may already have that, then do a cost-effective analysis as to which piece of equipment to replace first, and then establish a budget and report back to the Board of Supervisors on the budget, and then initiate purchasing. So the equipment's here. Gas-fueled equipment pollutes. It's also noisy. A lot of people complain about it, but we're not here because of noise. We're here because of greenhouse gas emissions, and we're also supposed to be thinking about air pollution, which I thought that was my life for all of my career. So I'm recommending that, I'm asking the council to support sending this recommendation to the board and getting the process going to do the analysis to replace all of the gas-fueled landscape equipment the county uses, and it's probably a lot, with battery-powered stuff, and to do it soon because the APCD grant won't be there forever. It's first come, first serve. It'll be available the first part of the year.
All right, so thank you, Councilmember Baldwin. Any questions from the council members? Okay, go ahead. I see Councilmember White and then Councilmember Garola. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sylvia. Well, I just want to commend Richard for bringing this before us. Living in Ojai, I know that the city of Ojai has done this, and it seems like a very popular thing in Ojai because the electric equipment is so much quieter. I happened to be at Ojai City Hall on the day when they had the announcement of the Ojai program, and I recalled the mayor with a sledgehammer in his hand, pounding up gas-fired landscape equipment. So I'm certainly in favor of our recommending this to the board.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Councilmember Garola.
So I'm definitely in favor of the concept. I know that in the fire service, we are trying to do this on our own for a lot of various reasons, but the air pollution portion being a big component of it. The issue, though, that I see is we need to make sure that we do all our detailed fact-finding information and so forth to present to with this recommendation. And I'm sure that that the figures are going to be out there. We just have to do a lot more detail. And who knows, maybe even, and I forget which county agency it is that handles all the maintenance, but they may even have some of the information that we need. I just want to make sure that we do a lot more detail, fact-finding, gathering before we, do a blanket submittal of how we feel the county should proceed. But I'm definitely in favor of the concept, definitely, and I definitely see it as a trend that hopefully the county already is working towards that. Like I say, I know in the fire service, as we replace equipment as needed, we're always trying to go battery powered. So
I'm not recommending that they do immediately go after this. In fact, my proposal is to do just what you said, is to hire or perform an inventory of existing equipment and do the analysis, and then figure out what works and what doesn't, and come back to the board with a recommendation for a budget to move ahead. So,
thank you, Dick. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm recommending that we do exactly what you want to do.
Yeah.
Thank you. And do we know what department within the county of Ventura would take care of the landscape equipment?
General Services Agency,
General
I believe.
Services.
Yeah.
Was that SASIC who then joined us last month for the meeting, Clay?
Yeah, and so one of the things I think that I'd be remiss if I didn't chime in on behalf of GSA is they would be responsible for doing that for all the facilities they manage for county facilities, which is substantial, but not 100% of them. So some of the enterprise or other things that don't fit squarely in their wheelhouse, If it's coming from the board, giving direction to all agencies, that would be one thing. If it's just GSA, then it would be a little bit more limited. But for example, there may be some facilities or associated grounds that aren't managed by GSA at some of the county, perhaps at some of the county hospital grounds and those sorts of things. So depending on how this went forward, those could be potentially picked up the board and assigned to the agencies so that it's coming directly from the board rather than targeting that one agency. Although I would say GSA has probably the deepest knowledge and does this regularly for a large number of the facilities and grounds.
Councilmember Garoli had a question.
So just as a follow-up, maybe we could get a presentation by GSA on what they're already doing or looking at, or what their process is for replacement. And then if we get a much better idea of where they're at this point in time, then maybe we can alter our recommendation based upon what GSA is already doing.
Okay.
So
So, yes, go
what-
ahead, Councilmember Baldwin. I do
We
want
had
to
a-
know, I do want to open it up for public comment because I do see 2 hands there. So go ahead.
we had a meeting scheduled with GSA to do exactly what
Yeah.
suggested. And that got canceled. We're trying to reschedule it. And
Oh,
so
good.
it's a good idea, but we haven't figured out the timing, but I'd like to get this thing going because I'm hoping to get on the road and do some camping.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from council members? Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Ferris.
Yeah, so thanks. Do we have a sense of, I'm reading this now, that there are 10,696 pieces of equipment, landscape equipment. Is that the number that we have, or is that the target number to be replaced, or is it some subset of that? And do we have a sense of, like, what is the number?
We don't know the number that the county of Ventura itself uses. The numbers that were reported here are for the classification that the county is within, that was done as a regional inventory by the California Resources Board.
So is the target number of gas-powered blower equipment, landscape equipment, less than 10,000? I mean, I guess here's what I think, like, it's one thing to set up a proposal. I don't know if it's 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. Like, we ought to be able to have a guess, right? I understand the inventory. This is always the catch. There's people like, well, I can't do it until you do an inventory. So we're asking the board to spend money to do a detailed inventory, which is going to take time. And do we care that we get it to within five gas-powered landscaping equipment to be able to say, here's the gross number of equipment that we have. We believe we can replace them over the course of X number of years. It's going to cost X $100 more than it would if we bought a gas-powered one based upon the numbers. Here's the additional cost it is, but here's the savings we get every year on GHG emissions. Like, we ought to be able to do a back of the envelope to be able to provide some sense of quantification on it. Otherwise, we're just asking the board to support a good idea, which I believe it is a good idea, but.
No, we're asking the board to have the county begin to do an inventory of existing equipment to find out what the county actually has, then to do a calculation on the cost effectiveness, then establish a priority based upon cost effectiveness, what to do first, and then come back to the board with a proposal for budget. It's sequential.
I understand, but I feel like there's got to be enough information to provide a rough order magnitude sense of this and say, this is what we think you should do. You should probably consider approving it, versus what I'm worried about is the recommendation goes to the board. It becomes something they debate and deliberate on. It's something we don't, and when we get to the inventory, do we care that it's within 1,000 pieces of equipment?
Without having inventory, I couldn't answer that. Nobody can.
But that's what I'm saying, is that we have no sense of the inventory right now, like zero. We can't get you to within plus or minus 10,000 gas-powered landscape equipment.
I might have known a little more if our meeting had gone forward, but This is
Yeah,
where I'm at.
I share your frustration with not being able to have the detailed conversation we thought we were trying to schedule, so.
Is it possible that we would we would have that meeting occur, Councilmember Baldwin, and then you can recycle this with some kind of finite number or where they start, as it's a thing that is transitional, that everything won't be replaced immediately, because it sounds like we need to go after some grants that are time sensitive, et cetera, or the county would need to do that. But would that be much more manageable perhaps to have that definite number?
No, and here's why. The process is to do an inventory of what you have, then figure out the cost effectiveness, and then figure out the priority for replacing things based upon cost effectiveness, and then develop a budget that you take to the board and say, we want to replace them in this order. That's the process, and it requires hiring somebody, unless they have somebody internally to actually put the pieces together to do the calculations. So it's for them to start a process, them being GSA or the county. And honestly, I don't know enough about the county to know who the other departments are that Clay mentioned. But it's like he said, GSA is the lion's share of, has a lion's share of the equipment. But they need to start it. There's $500,000 sitting there that if we sit there and count everything and wait until all of this is done and then go back to get approval, money's gone. It's first come, first served.
Okay, any other questions here? I know I need to depart at this time, and I see Vice Chair Chavez, you have your hand up. And so before we kick it over to public comment, would you like to make your comments or questions? I'll go ahead and depart at this time. And
Okay,
I believe
thank
we
you.
still have a quorum. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Dick, this is what my concerns is, that I'm wondering if we should just have this fee continue to come back. I like the idea of reaching out for those grants, but at the same time, I feel we need to get buy-in to determine if it's actually a feasible option. Will they be able to perform their duties at the expected level, or are we going to be reducing that quality of service? I hope that makes sense. So that would be my only thing, is let's get a little bit more information to determine if the quality of service is still going to be there, or is this going to hinder their quality of service? Because the county has quite a bit of properties. And I would hate to see that they're constantly having to stop work, change out battery, change out some type of equipment in order to continue that work. So that would be my comments. And I don't know if you have a response for that.
The county is not going to be the first through the door on this thing. County right now, from my perspective, is kind of the last through the door. Counties, well, I don't know about counties, but cities, parks, universities around the nation are already doing this because the equipment's available and is able to do the work better, ultimately cheaper. There's a higher front end cost for some of the equipment. And like electric vehicles, a long-term cost is a whole lot better, less weight. It's a lot of positive stuff for using it. And in the case of USC, I've been talking with the supervisor of the landscape team. They've got 40 landscapers. I don't know how many the county has, but 40 is quite a bit. They've been doing this for over 10 years, and this is not talking to the landscapers, is that they're thrilled with the performance. The performance is better than with gas fuel. So, and it's clean. That's the whole point from Mark's perspective. It's clean. It's a good way to reduce emissions, and the equipment exists today. It's not something coming down the road. It's been here for years. Ojai did this about 2 or 3 years ago. USC started 10 years ago.
I appreciate that, Dick. Thank you for that additional information. Is there any additional comments from the commission, from the council? Seeing and hearing none. Clay, can you call,
Here.
Commission, Councilmember White?
Thank you, Daniel. Well, as I said, I do like Dick's idea. I think he's put together a process for moving it forward. There is an awful lot of money out there available to make this change. We have to start somewhere. I think it's a good idea. I would like to move that the council approve Dick's proposal.
With due respect, point of order, my understanding is we probably need to have public comments to be able to weigh in on this.
That's
I just want to make
correct.
sure that we're doing this in order and making sure that we've given the public the opportunity to weigh in.
Okay, I'll wait.
Thank you, Councilmember Ferris. Is it, you have any additional comments, Councilmember White?
I'll wait, Daniel.
Thank you. So we'll go ahead and go to the public, and Clay, can you go ahead and call those members, please?
Sure. I saw Kristen Kessler was the first hand that I saw, followed by Todd Collard.
Good morning, everyone. I just wanted to say that I support this 110%. I've been working on the gas-powered leaf blower issue for a while. And as someone who's a renter, we are basically at the mercy of, landscapers who overuse the blowers. And it's frustrating to reach out to management about it because there's a lot of, sympathy, but nothing really ever gets done about these things. So I just think this is a wonderful, fantastic first step to start exposing the public to the fact that these machines are just as effective, but quieter. And I have had experience working with the Air Pollution Control District on grants, and I know that the funds are there. So I just want to say, for renters, for everyone, this is a wonderful first step. And thank you so much, Commissioner Baldwin, for your interest in this. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Todd Collard.
I appreciate Commissioner Baldwin's initiative on this. I, like several other commissioners, I think are a bit, say, frustrated about the amount of time can be spent in going through the long process he outlined, which I believe has a point and should be pursued. But I would suggest you consider a recommendation of the county board that they pass a policy that orders all departments, which would be GSA principally, but also probably hospitals and airports, to begin in their next purchases of any landscaping equipment that would be electric, unless it can be demonstrated that that's infeasible, either because the product doesn't exist or it's an inferior performer. That'll at least get the ball rolling, and they'll take advantage of the $500,000 that's been alluded to sooner than later. That can be followed by the more rigorous investigation that Mr. Baldwin suggested, which I think is important to quantify what's going on. So I would also claim, though, that the idea of a cost benefit analysis is the classic problem where you don't have a cost on carbon emissions and we don't have a value on human life. We simply look at it, is it cheaper to operate electrically versus gas? And I hate to see these decisions made solely on that very, I think, limited and primitive assessment of where we are now. We need to put a price on greenhouse gas emissions so that things can swing towards the electric option. Right now, it has to compete head to head on what's cheaper, short-term, long-term, and so forth. And public health, be damned, it isn't enter into it factually. I'd also remind you too that at 3 o'clock, as mentioned earlier, the Uniform Building Code is going to be taken up. And in that process, a reach code process is undergoing. I'm not sure what's being proposed at this time. I've long suggested that part of that reach code for the county include external outlets, electrical outlets around properties and homes, so that if somebody wants to use electrical equipment and they were cord-based until more batteries came along, at least they'll be out there for that kind of purpose. That could be built into the code and be just a practical extension of the electrical services throughout a given property. So it's not all internal, it could be external as well. And that your council could make a recommendation to that sort to be part of the inclusion of a reach code. So 2 separate tracks, but all of them trying to get more electrical usage out in the landscaped world. Thank you.
At this time, I don't see any other hands raised, but if there are members of the public that would like to make a comment, please use the raise hand feature or take yourself off mute and let us know that you'd like to make a public comment.
Seeing and hearing none, we'll go ahead and bring it back to the council for additional deliberations. Councilmember Ferris.
Yeah, Councilmember Baldwin, can I just ask a few questions just about this? So if there was a electric piece of equipment, what's generally the rough price point of purchasing that and decommissioning something else?
So you're kind of sounding like you're in an echo chamber to me. I'm not sure if it's you or me, but.
Might be me.
So.
Are you able to hear me at all?
Yeah, I can hear it. Just sounded, it was echoing. Oh, go ahead. So
I just wanted to, yeah, one question was, assume we wanted to buy a piece of landscape equipment all electric. How much is it? How much are we talking? Is it $100, $1,000, $10,000?
Oh, well, it depends on the piece of equipment. Is it a blower? Is it a string cutter? Is it a lawnmower? It turns out that battery lawnmowers are cheaper than gas. Hand blowers are more expensive than gas. But then these guys, they're set up so that they're large enough, they run all day. We're talking about something that, like at USC, they work all day with this equipment. And in their case, they spent like $120,000 for their entire inventory, whatever 40 workers use. I couldn't tell you, but the price is one reason to do the cost effectiveness. You want to get lawnmowers, you want to get blowers, weed whackers, whatever. Heavy equipment like chainsaws aren't really available yet. The other thing to keep in mind, I should have mentioned up front, is in 2 years, you're not going to be able to buy gas equipment anyway. The state's banning it, sale of it in California.
So a question I have is, if it takes 2 years to get the inventory and a cost of analysis that people are satisfied with, does it matter?
I think the inventory is almost.
No.
I think the inventory is almost available. But we were going to learn more about that a couple of weeks ago, and for some reason the meeting got canceled. So that part I don't know.
Yeah, just as a note, I'll mention a list of frustration. Hopefully our action can't be delayed by not being able to meet with members of the county staff to provide us the information we need to provide an informed recommendation. I do worry that if we're being asked to kind of like validate things with the information, we can never get the information, then we can never provide action unless it turns into something that's, I mean, I'm providing frustration that we don't have some details, a little bit more details to quantify what our recommendation is, which I still believe is a good one. But I also don't want canceled meetings to be a reason why we can't provide that quantification. So I guess maybe that's a note to Clay, if we can get that on the books.
I can, GSA was informed that we're interested in that information, but I'll make sure I make it a very explicit request for them and to provide us with what information they have. And if they don't have that information, which maybe that's part of why we haven't been provided it, if they don't have it, to tell us that it's not available so we can confirm what is and is not available.
The thing I don't want is I don't want pushback from what council recommends that we didn't do enough homework when we've been asking for detailed information to provide that informed understanding and we can't get it. then it turns it's this rough cycle of basically a hamster wheel. So
Right. I think I understand the concern there, and I'll reach out to GSA, but make sure that we have the greatest extent of information that is available to us, and the information that we don't have, that it is verified that just doesn't exist, so that we can proceed with the information that we do have,
okay.
or so that your council can.
And again, Councilmember Baldwin, your recommendation is that the county get a clearer understanding of the inventory available and costs associated with making that transition. That's what we're asking them to do.
Right, that's the process is, I'm recommending a process. The process is to start the inventory and to conduct a cost-effective analysis of what to replace when, then to develop a budget. This doesn't say change everything now. It says go in and look at what you've got and figure out how to replace what in a cost-effective way over time. It's a process.
I understand, and I know process. I always the key is if the process gets in the way of action, it could just turn into a bunch of. I'm trying to figure out how do we get some information to go look. We think you ought to do it, but we ought to be able to understand what it costs. I am worried that if we say here's your process by doing this, they can take 2 years by getting the information that we need, and by that time it's overcome by events because we can't buy them in the state anyway. You can't buy gas powered stuff in the state, right? 2 years from now. No? Am I misreading the memo?
I think the county's a lot farther along than that based on what Clay has said, but I don't know. Well, so what would you propose? That we just say convert everything now?
You would like to have an understanding of how many do we have, rough order. How much does it cost, rough order, to replace these versus buying gas powered ones? Or is it going to be something to where in 2 years, it doesn't matter what this recommendation of this council is. You're only going to be able to buy electric stuff anyway, right?
That's true, except that the gas equipment lasts a long, long time.
So you say you can continue to repair it because that's not going to be the.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So the cost of transitioning it all, that's the estimate. How many pieces of equipment do we have rough order? How much on average does it take to replace it? And how long does it take to replace it all? Because we would want them to replace it all, right?
Ideally.
What I worry about is that we've done it. We've done this. We've sort of like looked at the cost. We have evaluation criteria for this, and we sort of just punted and said we can't even give you any information. We have no idea how many long landscape equipment things we have. We have no idea. I don't believe that. I think that there's got to be some idea, maybe a wide variability, but it's got to be more than one and less than 1 million. Like there's got to be something in there that tells us rough order how many we have. I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm trying to this is what happens in the real world. We can't have an 8-month study to get something down to nickels and dimes if we want action. So. All right, I appreciate the discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Ferris. Councilmember White.
Well, hearing Keith's comments and Mick's comments, wanting to have more information. I just agree with Dick that his proposal is to generate that information. Granted, he didn't say do it within 2 weeks. I don't think it'll take 2 years for it to come together. I think we need to come to a decision on this matter. I'm in favor of moving it forward as Dick has proposed. And unless Dick wants to revise this, I'm in favor of putting out a motion to adopt it.
Okay, is there any additional comments from the commission? From the council? So the motion has been put by Councilmember White to move the recommended action. Is there a second?
Well, I'll second it. See where it
Okay,
goes.
it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion? Councilmember Ferris.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm not going to stand in the way of the motion. I will abstain. I feel like we need more information, but I don't want to stand in the way of the council and Councilmember Baldwin's proposal in this. I just want to make sure that as we're going forward on these, we try to get at least some cursory information on it to be able to help say, we believe we've done the best homework we can, but we think we need to move forward with it. And potentially to Clay on these things, like we need some assistance from staff to be able to help back up these proposals so that they're not coming back to us saying we didn't do our homework. So for that reason, I just wanted to state, I don't want to stand in the way of the motion.
Thank you. Any other deliberations on the motion? Seeing and hearing none. Clay, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris, you will abstain from this one,
Abstain,
correct?
yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Garola,
Nay. No.
Councilmember Para,
Aye.
Vice Chair Chavez,
Abstain.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
So we have 3 yeses. We currently have 6 people here, and I believe we need a simple majority. We have a 3-3. Or, sorry, that's not a 3-3 because we have 2 abstentions. So we have a.
Question, point of order on that. Are the votes needed? It's a majority of those voting, not necessarily a majority of the council. Or
Correct. So we need a quorum present, and we need a simple majority.
Which, based on what I've heard, if we have 6 people present, 3-1, that is
3-1 because 2 are abstentions rather than nays, so the
Correct.
motion passes.
Yep.
Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and proceed to our next item. I'm sorry, item number.
Item
was that
20.
number 20, yes, thank you. So request for information regarding county government vehicle fleet electrification. This is being presented by council members Baldwin and White. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you both.
Several years ago, Phil and I met with Supervisor Bennett, try to get the county moving a little faster, if you will, on implementing the use of electric vehicles in the county fleets. And Supervisor Bennett did that. It came in. And since then, I've had some discussions with Clay and GSA about what's going on with the vehicle fleet. And it seems like the motor pool is doing pretty good, but what's going on in the rest of the fleet is not that well known. And so this is simply a request for information to find out what is going on with respect to the implementation of the use of electric vehicles in the total fleet, not just in the motor pool. And then when that information comes in, to try to figure out whether or not it'd be maybe appropriate from what we do, our point of view, to encourage the Board of Supervisors to do more to convert the fleet to electric vehicles. But without knowing the data, I don't know. So this is a request for information, period.
Thank you. Councilmember White, did you have any additional comments for this?
Well, I think Dick covered it. Yeah, in 2019, the Board of Supervisors approved the policy to move forward on electric vehicles and electric vehicle chargers. And to ask staff to evaluate the costs and to come back to the board with requests for budget to implement this if needed. I've kind of been bragging about what Dick and I did, and I'm just a little concerned that they're not moving very fast. So I'm just curious to know how the county departments are doing in electrifying their feed. I think it's a simple request for information that should be easily handled by county staff.
Thank you. We'll open it up to the council members. If they have any questions, we'll go to Councilmember Ferris.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I want to commend Councilmember Baldwin's and White's recommendation of putting this on here for this. It provides some context from the previous discussions we had in other meetings about sort of electrification of county buildings and encouraging it for other commercial buildings in the unincorporated area, where we had the discussion about, well, if it's the cheapest alternative, then we'll go electric. Otherwise, we'll go somewhere else. And in some ways, we sort of like need to balance that differently. If we, it's not purely dollars. It is the dollars spent toward the policies that we have here of reducing GHG emissions. This particular policy is one, as you're saying, Councilmember White, this is from 3 years ago. This is one that specifically targets electrical fleets. And there is a section in here which I noted is in here and is similarly presented in some of the other proposals later on the buildings, which is about the sort of reevaluation of what cost effectiveness is and things. And I would like to know how well we're pursuing that on the electric fleets, because we can propose all the policies we want. This is an example of one that's been implemented, right? And if we have the policies, we're not sure whether it's being effective or not, then it may go toward the recommendations that we have on other topics. So thank you for bringing this forward. This provides a lot of context for some of the other discussions we're having.
Thank you for your comments. Any additional council members?
Yes.
Councilmember Garola, and then we'll go back to you, Councilmember White.
Not to just echo what Mick said, but totally agree with that. I think I'd like to see maybe Councilmember Baldwin work with Clay to get the verbiage down exactly what we're looking for. There's part of the fleet probably will never be, I don't know if you can do heavy equipment type of electrification, bulldozers, fire engines, so forth. But I think that we do need to see what the, not just what the current results are, but what the overall plan is. And I think it's a good request, and I support it. Just we need to get the verbiage down, whatever detail we need to make sure we get the information back that we're specifically looking for.
Thank you. We'll go to Councilmember White.
Thank you, Daniel. Clay, could you put up the adopted board policy on vehicle electrification that was approved in 2019? I think it responds to what Keith and Mick were concerned about.
Are folks seeing what I'm putting up? This was the recommendation from the letter. This is not the minutes, because the minutes just refer to the letter, but there's an A through B section, and then there's a page break, and there's an F through H section on these things.
Yeah, I'd like just to point out that item C, give conceptual support for additional fleet conversion to EVs and seeking grants for this purpose. And D, recognize that the administrative manual policy regarding fleet vehicle purchase, quote unquote, cost effectiveness should be updated to provide flexibility for EVs and hybrids And what I read in item D is an understanding that electric vehicles may cost more than gasoline powered, but that with a board policy of wanting to move towards electric vehicles, that would be allowed, that you're not necessarily making decisions on what's the cheapest gasoline versus electric. And item E, I think, is important. Express a willingness to consider having the general fund cover the higher cost of EVs if grant funds are not available. That's recognizing that, yes, EVs may cost more money, but that the board is willing to consider coming up with the extra money. If you could scroll down to the next items, I think item F is the most telling of all in what the board adopted 3 years ago. Discourage the addition of new gasoline sedans to the fleet, while recognizing that a small number of new gas sedans may be needed. And in those cases, hybrids preferred. To me, it's a clear policy statement that the board made 3 years ago to move away from gasoline powered vehicles and into electric vehicles. I think this is important to recognize that maybe the county departments haven't done a great job in following this policy direction, and what Dick and I have suggested is to try to find out where are you at, county departments, in responding to this policy. And I think the other thing about this policy adopted 3 years ago is also applicable to landscape equipment. It's also applicable to the proposal to move towards electrification of county buildings, knowing that the County Board of Supervisors wants to address climate change, and this is a good example of a format for taking on landscape equipment and for taking on emissions from burning natural gas in buildings.
Thank you, Councilmember White, for your comments. Are there any additional comments from the council? And I can't see everybody. I am not seeing any additional comments from the council, so we will open it up for public comments and we'll go to the public. Clay, do you mind calling those members?
Sure. If a member of the public would like to make a comment, please hit the raise hand button in front of you or unmute yourself and let us know you'd like to make a comment. And I'd like to recognize Todd Collard as he used the first hand up.
Watching your meetings makes me very frustrated. I can sense frustration amongst commissioners, but this has to be the most frustrating of your items. After 3 years, it seems to me this is an opportunity to slip through people's hands. Frankly, it's very discouraging to find out that even with the board ordering this kind of direction, that there's been no quantification of it happening. And I suspect there's been direct violations of it too. And maybe making a modest Swiftian proposal, let the citizens go after bounty hunters to figure out who's screwing up. This is just unacceptable. I think the board is serious about this. They ought to be the clearinghouse and say no gas equipment of any kind, buildings, vehicles, other equipment, landscaping, gets purchased unless it's approved by the board. That way, any agency is going to have to go to the board and embarrass themselves by trying to justify gas equipment. Or we're going to make a really good argument for why gas is the only alternative. Otherwise, it doesn't appear that GSA is the proper screening entity through their purchasing process to make that happen. And if you're not getting the data from these different departments, the CEO's office is the one that should be cracking the whip. I'm not pointing my finger at Clay, even though it's right below me in my screen, but that office is the one that's got the centralized power to direct communications down and across the agencies and back up to your commission, so, or council. I'm going to quit. I'm too angry. Sorry.
If there are any other individuals in the public that would like to make a comment, please unmute yourself and make a comment or hit the raise hand button. I do not see anyone else at this time. Oh, I see Roseanne Witt. Recognize you.
I would just like to concur with Todd's frustration. I will remind you that we are in an emergency. Emergency is in this commission's name. And if we can't expect that we are getting follow-up on something that was directed by the Board of Supervisors 3 years ago, what chance do we have of getting any of these recommendations to be implemented in the time frame and on the scale that is required to solve this problem? That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any or hearing any additional members of the public. So we'll go ahead and bring it back to the council. Council members, any additional questions? Councilmember Ferris.
No actual questions on the topic. I think I just wanted to get an understanding. This is a request for information. Is there any need for action from our point of view? I mean, or do we need to make a motion to direct a request for information? I just don't know what the right protocol is.
Staff is pretty clear that this is an information request and it's going to go directly to our agencies. But if the council would like to make a motion or specifically requesting it to formalize it and get it on the record, that is your prerogative and your council is welcome to do so.
I would support such a motion.
I see Councilmember White's hand up.
I would support such a motion, and I will make such a motion to move this forward as presented by Dick and me.
Do we have any additional comments from the council?
We don't have a second yet unless you call Mix a second.
I would give
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember White to move recommended action. Is there a second?
I think I saw that was a second by Councilmember Ferris. Was that correct? Okay.
Now that I'm off mute, I'll second it.
Baldwin, I wanted to give Councilmember Baldwin the opportunity to second his own request.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any deliberations on that motion? Seeing and hearing none. Clay, can we get a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councilmember White.
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris.
Yes.
Councilmember Garola.
Aye.
Councilmember Para.
Aye.
Vice Chair Chavez.
Aye.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you for that. We'll go ahead and proceed to our next item, which is a request for the VCCEC to approve a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from County of Ventura buildings. This is being presented by Councilmember White, and I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Daniel. Clay, could you please put the words of the proposed policy up on the screen? This is the, I don't know, third time maybe the this has been discussed by our group. And at the last meeting, we had a representative from the General Services Agency, Dave Sasek, come and he had some good comments, some good feedback from what I had written up originally. And I just want to say I have revised the proposal significantly in light of what he said. And also in light of the policy adopted for electric vehicles that we just talked about, adopted 3 years ago by the Board of Supervisors. And so I revamped the proposal, and it's on the screen there. And if you could highlight item A there, this is policy direction, moving towards electrification and decarbonization of new and existing county government buildings. And I added the word government because I think that might have been confusing last time, thinking about all the buildings in the county. We're only talking about county government buildings. And that the policy proposal is virtually identical to the one adopted by the board 3 years ago for electric vehicles, supporting electrification and decarbonization of the county's buildings and facilities, and a big qualifier, where feasible, and seeking grants and other financial incentives to make that happen. Recognizing that reducing natural gas and propane use and embodied carbon in building materials will help the county achieve its climate change goals. In my previous version, I had put in specific goals, the specific goals that are in the general plan, climate action plan, that Dave Sasek, I think, correctly pointed out are not realistically achievable in the short term for the county. Specifically, he mentioned natural gas consuming equipment, for example, to generate steam in the hospital, that would be very, very difficult to achieve in the short term. But again, as in the electric vehicle policy, direct the staff to the item B there, direct the county staff to proceed with the next steps, B Baker. Direct the county staff to proceed with the next steps in preparing for that. And this is similar to what we just adopted on the inventory and analysis and funding opportunities, and to come back to the board with budget requests as necessary to implement the policy. And the policy, again, is moving towards electrification and decarbonization of new, up at the top, new and existing county government buildings where feasible. And again, item D talks about cost effectiveness, where we need to rethink, and Mick has been the one talking about this more than anybody, that we can't keep making decisions on what's cheaper, natural gas or electricity. You have to realize that cost effectiveness decisions, the decisions based on lowest cost need to be updated to provide the flexibility for the extra expense that may be needed for electrification. And if you could scroll down, please. And finally, express a willingness to consider having the general fund cover the higher costs of electrification, decarbonization measures. We have lots of inventory information and the background information. I know you've all seen it before. Clay did a good job of digging that out on how many therms of natural gas and propane have been consumed by the county and how much CO2 has been generated. Again, I'll point out, if you look at the last sentence in that paragraph, if you could highlight that. The Board of Supervisors has already committed to purchase all its electricity 100% renewable sources like solar and wind, and has committed to purchasing electric vehicles for the county fleet. And we hope that that last statement, that commitment is really being realized. So again, this is the same thing as moving the vehicle fleet towards electric vehicles. It's the same thing as moving landscape equipment towards electricity and eliminating gasoline. I believe that I've reformatted this, rewritten it in such a way that should be no longer of a concern to county staff who are responsible for these facilities. So I hope that we have it at a place where the council can support this and move it towards the Board of Supervisors for their adoption. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember White. We'll go ahead and open it up to the council members if they have any questions on this. Seeing and hearing none. Councilmember White, just one question from me.
Sure.
Are we talking about government owned and operated facilities, or are we talking about government owned, but yet facilities that could be rented out to other entities?
The way it's worded now, it's county government facilities, which is a combination of leased and owned. I know that the Board of Supervisors recently approved the 100% renewable electricity purchase for leased buildings. So it would be both. It has nothing to do with city facilities. That was in your question. Only the county.
Yes, I misspoke by saying city. Okay, thank you for that. Council members, any questions? Seeing and hearing now, we'll open it to the public for any comments. And Clay, if you don't mind, if you can call those members.
Certainly. If folks could please hit the raise hand button on your Zoom dashboard. And if you are having trouble finding that, please feel free to unmute yourselves and let us know that you'd like to speak. At this time, I do not see any raised hands in the gallery, and I haven't seen anyone unmute themselves.
All right, so we'll go ahead and bring it back to the council. Council, what is your pleasure for this item?
Supervisor.
Sorry, we'll go to Councilmember Ferris.
Thank you. I did have just Councilmember White, just a question on the change of the verbiage of county government buildings and such. I just want to be clear as to what the recommendation is. So what was it before? What was the verbiage before?
Okay.
Or what was it before? And how did you think it was? How did we think it might be misinterpreted so that I understand?
Okay, in the adopted general plan, 2020 general plan and the climate action plan were emission reduction goals and deadlines that the county was attempting to achieve, and they're based on state of California emission reduction goals. And I don't have them in front of me, but they're significant. And in the case of county facilities, I think that the director Sasek from GSA was persuasive to me that particularly the 2030 goal would be unachievable. And I replied that, well, they're just goals. And you recall in the last meeting, I said, well, they're just goals. And he goes, yeah, they're just goals. But when we see things adopted that way, it can mean mandates in some people's eyes.
Pardon me, I completely remember that. That wasn't the focus of my question. I was trying to think about that. You said that there was some verbiage of like county government buildings and facilities, and it was worded something different in the previous one. I was trying to figure out why the change and what that was before.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
No worries.
Before it said County of Ventura buildings. And I mean, I'm in a building in the County of Ventura, but it's so I added the word government.
Buildings in the county, we wanted to make sure that we're not having it interpreted that way. We're talking about buildings owned by the county government.
Owned or leased by a county government, correct? Okay,
so then that was going to be my second question, which was if the county owns the building, and if the county owns the building, that this would be a target building that we would want to have retrofitted by this policy change, right?
Correct.
If there is a government building that, and it need not be operated, or the county organizations work within it, it is that if the county government owns it, that's a target building, right?
Yes.
And if, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Also leased buildings.
That's the other part, which is that if the county owns the building but leases it to someone else, that's a target building under this policy, right?
Yes.
And if the county leases a building from someone else, are we saying that is a target building also?
Correct. And that's consistent with what the board did recently in their leasing of buildings to others, buildings owned by the county to buildings that the county leases for its own use, that they want 100% renewable electricity.
Okay, so.
But to negotiate leases that include the goal of electrification also.
Okay. But is that so that particular thing, that's more of a policy change on buildings from which the county would lease from, having nothing to do with they can't control whether that building is going to electrify. We just choose whether to lease it from them, right?
They can choose whether or not to lease, and that can be a requirement of the lease.
Right. Is that what's in this resolution, or is it focused on government-owned buildings and facilities and the control with which we change or retrofit their electrification aspects?
I would say that they're all included in there. Doesn't have a specific paragraph about leased building requirements.
I guess that's the thing, is that I was not interpreting this as being something that it covers how the county chooses to lease other entities' buildings with respect to it. It was more of a control of how they maintain the buildings that they own.
It's actually both, and both is consistent with what the county has done already for purchasing electricity. And the board had nothing to do with our council, voted to require that buildings that the county leases from others have 100% renewable electricity. So it'd be consistent with what they've already done.
Councilmember Ferris, do you mind if I jump in and just ask the question real quick? It's kind of in line of what you're asking.
Yeah, no, please do. I'm actually trying to find the
So-
language, but yeah, I appreciate your question.
Councilmember White, I think, and this is might be, and Councilmember Ferris, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think what the line of questioning, and it kind of sparked my attention, is, are we saying that the county, say for an example, if they are renting or leasing a facility from the city of Oxnard, that facility that they're leasing from the city of Oxnard must comply with this recommendation that it has to be 100% renewable energy, even though it's not a county-owned property?
I believe that is, I believe that's what the county board has already done. I mean, I could be incorrect about that, but I'm pretty sure that's what they did.
Okay, so.
And it's not, you know, I want to emphasize, this is not a mandate that all the buildings have to be 100% electric. It's moving in the direction of electrification where feasible. And
No, absolutely, and I get that 100%. I think I was just, from what I was interpreting from Councilmember Ferris's comments were, if the county was the leaser and leasing from a different entity, that building that they do not own be 100% renewable. That, I think that's what I was interpreting from Councilmember Ferris. I might be wrong on that, but that kind of sparked me of, are we saying that we have to rent facilities or office space or whatever it may be that is already transitioning towards 100% renewable?
It does not say that. It's not a mandate. It's a policy direction to move towards electrification.
Okay. Councilmember Ferris, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask this is I just want to know what I'm voting on, you know, and I feel like in the discussion from a previous meeting, what this policy was, it was directed at the electrification of the building itself, for which it was intended that these are the ones that the county owns. And in the discussion, it's being described as it's that, plus we're also stating that any leases in the future, the county would not lease anything from a building that is not 100% electric. And the reason I ask that is I don't, unless you could point it to me in there, and I'm happy to have it pointed to me if I'm missing it. I don't see that in the language.
You know, it doesn't say, it does not, as I just said to Daniel, does not mandate this. So no, it doesn't.
I don't even see that it's a recommendation of new leases should be, cannot be done unless electric. It says the county in other areas has committed to 100% renewable energy sources. It doesn't say anything about the leasing of new facilities. And we could bring back a proposal to do that. They seem to me to be kind of separate. And that's the reason why I keep asking the questions on it. I want to know what I'm voting on.
Okay, so if we put the words electrification of new and existing county and leased government buildings where feasible, with that.
Is that what you want to do? Because I didn't until probably 5 minutes ago realize that it was expanded scope from the focus of electrification of the buildings the county owns.
Yes, the answer is yes, that it's a recommendation that the board adopt a policy to electrify its buildings that they use.
But what is its? Its is is doing a lot of work there. Like, you know, it is the ones that they own, or the ones that they own and the ones that they lease from other entities, private or public.
My intent would be both. If you're uncomfortable with leased buildings, we can pull that.
I'm uncomfortable given that we've had about 5 minutes of discussion on it. And it just, it's not something that we discussed in the last meeting. I'm surprised about it now.
Council members, I'm going to jump in real quick. I just want to poll the council members to determine who has, we're reaching that 2 o'clock mark in 7 minutes. So I want to make sure that we could still have a quorum so that we can continue. We still have to have the public have comment on this. Is everyone okay if we go over, or does anyone have a hard 2 o'clock stop time?
As a note, I do have a hard stop, although my understanding is that on this particular proposal, that we have had the public comment, the opportunity to comment. So I don't think we need to do that. I will say this, here's my poll. Like I am still not happy that we haven't quantified enough information on this. But part of that is because we had a meeting we were trying to schedule and get some information on it, got canceled on it, and now we're in the middle of it. I would not stand in the way, much like the previous proposal, would not stand in the way of this being approved if it sticks with the interpretation that is about electrification of county-owned buildings and facilities. If the intent is to also cover leases, or you want to add other language, I will vote no on such a thing, because I don't believe or I would recommend that it be pulled and brought back at a different meeting. Because I just don't think that's the interpretation of what this is proposing. So that's my info to the discussion.
Thank you, Councilmember Ferris. Clay, just real quick, this technically was a continued item from our last meeting. So the public did provide comments on it. Are they entitled to have comments on this once again if they've already provided their comments?
We offered an opportunity for public comment today at this hearing, and
Okay.
no public comments were made.
Okay. All right. I did see our new council member, and now I see her hand down.
Yes,
go
I was
to-
just gonna say, because I wasn't able to chime in. I do have a hard stop at 2.
Okay.
So I didn't want to disappear and not say anything.
No, of course. So Clay, I also have a hard stop time. So since there's only 6 of us and 3 of us have a hard stop time at 2, what would be your recommendation for moving forward on this one? Hold on, Councilmember White. I do see your hand.
I recommend, it is at this council's prerogative, but there are a couple of other items. So there's another agenda item 22 that comes after this before we get to future agenda items. But those are the 2 items left. So you could wrap this up and choose to adjourn. If we feel it's a really hard stop that folks aren't going to have people here, alternatively, you can just try and squeeze everything in and proceed with those that you have. You just won't be able to make any decisions once you lose a quorum.
Okay. So Councilmember White, if you can just make your comments real quick, and then maybe we can squeeze in that last item.
Yeah, I say let's move it forward. I'm agreeable to clarifying mixed concern on lease buildings and make sure that it's understood that it's new and existing county-owned buildings. And with that,
And facilities.
yes. And with that adjustment, I would move that we approve it.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor from Councilmember White. Is there a second?
I believe.
I'll second it.
Oh, okay. A second by Councilmember Baldwin. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on that motion?
Just a note, I will abstain. I do not want to stand in the way of it. I do want some comments articulated that. Actually, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna support this one, but I want to state for the record that my support goes toward the fact that we were not able to get additional quantifiable information to help support this recommendation, but I don't want that to stand in the way of recommendations coming out of council.
Thank you. Any additional deliberations on this motion? Councilmember Gorilla.
Yeah, so obviously I've got 2 o'clock hard stop also. That's why I'm driving. But the area I serve has very few county facilities and let alone anything leased. And I know we're not talking about, I would like to just sit down and digest this a little bit more and see it, how it impacts the area that I serve.
Thank you. Any additional deliberations? I'll just say real quick is that I'm all for transitioning towards electrification, but I feel like there's still a lot of unanswered questions that we have. So for me, I would not be able to support this. I need more information in order to really get behind it 100%. And the language needs to be a lot clearer. So those are my comments. Any additional comments? Seeing and hearing none. Clay, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Councilmember Garola,
No.
Councilmember Para,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chavez,
No.
Councilmember Baldwin,
Yes.
motion moves forward at 4-2. Motion passes.
Thank you for that. Council members, we are literally 1 minute away. It would be my recommendation that we continue the next 2 items to our next meeting, or the next item, number 22, to our next meeting, as we're 1 minute away. What is the feelings from the council?
I think that's fine.
I concur.
Okay. So can I get a motion for continuance of item 22?
Motion to continue.
Been continued. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to continue item 22. Clay, can we get a roll call, please?
Thank you. Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Councilmember Garola,
Aye.
Councilmember Para,
Aye.
Vice Chair Chavez,
Aye.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Okay, motion is, item is continued until next meeting. And then item number 3, future agenda items. I don't have anything specific for this council other than the next meeting is scheduled for September 27th.
Great. So with that, that will conclude our meeting for today. Thank you, council members and public, for your participation, and we'll see you at our September meeting. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.